To define an if statement, we will use the keyword if. Now, whatever is our condition would be followed here. So for example, I can simply write true. So by default, I am putting a hard-coded value true. So that means this particular code will get executed, whatever we will write into if block. Now, unlike other conditions where we will use braces, parentheses to define a block, in case of Python, we define a statement or a block using indentation. So if I want to write anything within this particular if statement, then I'll use indentation. So as you see, when we pressed enter, we have given another line with some indentation. So let's say we are writing here print inside, sorry, let me put that into single quotes, inside if block, or say if statement. Okay, now this means if this condition is true, which we have defined as true itself, this particular line should get executed. So let's run it and see. So this is inside if statement. Now suppose rather than one line, we have multiple lines. So we will follow the same indentation and say this is line 2 within if statement. Okay. So as you can see, as many number of lines that we put will get executed. Now suppose if rather than true, the condition would have been false, then none of these lines would get printed, right? So this is a very simple if statement. Whenever it is true, the whatever we are writing in the indentation will get executed. Whenever it's false, this line will be skipped. And the next line with the same indentation is where the program will resume its control. So for example, I'll simply say print outside of this statement. Outside if statement. So now even if condition is true or false, outside if statement will be printed. So you can see when it is false, it's printing, and whether it's true, this outside will always get printed. Now, rather than putting a hard-coded value, you can also put some condition. For example, you can define a variable, say a is equal to 2, and then you can say if a is greater than 3. Now, we know this is a false statement, so it will just behave as if we are giving a false. So that means none of this will get executed. But if we would have, say, put up it as a is less than 3, then both the inside code would have been executed. Correct? So this is pretty easy. Now let's see if we want to add one statement. So right now what is happening? If it is true, something gets executed. If it is false, the program simply comes out. In case of else, the condition will have both the sides. If it is true, then do something. Otherwise, do something else. So one of the block will at least get executed. So let's take an example. Let me just copy paste the code again. Okay. And we'll say inside if, or rather than that, let me say condition is true. And then we will write else followed by colon, and then condition is false. Condition is false. And this line, which is just outside, is irrespective of whether it is true or false. Outside if else. So let's run it. Now this condition is, of course, 2 is less than 3 is true. So this piece should get executed. Let's run it. So we'll say condition if true gets executed, and say if I would have a is equal to 4, then false condition, that is the code within else would have got executed. So this is pretty easy, right? Now let's see how much we have got it. So there's a quick check, and that should help to just have a little more understanding whether we have got the concept right or not. So here's the question. The question here is if none, print yes, else print no. What do you think should be the output? So the twist here is rather than giving a direct Boolean condition, we are giving none. And in the typecasting, we have seen that if you provide a non-zero or non-null value, then its binary equivalent would be true. But if it is none, empty, zero, then the binary equivalent would be false. So what do you think? If none would have to be interpreted and it will get converted into false, what should the output? Right, the output would be no, because the code will enter else part and print no. Now, rather than none, say if the value would have been 10, what would have been the output? It will be equivalent to true, and if true, print yes. So yes should have been the output, right? So with that, now let's look into the next part, which is if elif else. Okay. Now, just to save time, I have already kept it here ready so that we don't put a lot of time typing it, and we have already understood the logic, right? So if elif else is similar to if and else. However, rather than having one if or else, we will have multiple if elif blocks, and one of this code will get executed as per the condition, right? So say we have two variables a and b, and we are taking the ratio. So ratio is a upon b. Of course, ratio would be less than 1 because a is lesser than 5. So this condition is false. Now, when this is false, of course, this will not get executed. So the second condition is it less than 0.01? The next condition is if it is less than 1. And finally, if none of it, then both are equal. So let's run it to see what's the output. It says b is greater, right? Because the ratio is less than 1. Suppose we would have made it 5. Then the output have been they are equal. Because first it would have checked is it greater than 1, less than 0.01, less than 1. None of this would be true. So finally, it would mean they are equal, right? So it is pretty easy. Now let's have another quick check on if elif piece. This is a theoretical question. If elif else, will it execute one block of code? Options are true, false, depends on code. There is no elif statement in Python, none of above. Right. First option would be right because as we know, only one block of code will get executed out of multiple if elif else blocks or statements that have been given. So with that, we have seen basics of if else, and if elif. Now we will have a quick look into another syntax which is pass. As we have seen, in case of Python, indentation is really important. It defines the which particular statement comes into which particular part of the code. Now, if you don't know what you are going to write, or you want to defer your program, and if you leave it blank, then Python will throw an error. For example, let's say we have some condition and we are writing a code. We don't know what that condition would be. Now, if I would leave it blank, then it will throw an error because it says it is expecting an indented block, correct? Because after if, there has to be something within it. So in such a case, what we will do is we will write pass. So pass is just like a hash when we use it for command. The difference is pass is a null statement, but unlike command, it is not ignored by Python interpreter. Python interpreters understands that okay, here is this particular code which is a requirement because of syntactical reason, but it does not need to be executed. So for example, rather than pass, if you would say hash print and say nothing, then this entire thing is going to be ignored by the interpreter, and thus you will still get the error. So the right way in such a case is to use a pass statement. So let's quickly have a recap. Pass is used when you need a syntactical presence and you don't want it to be executed. It is a null statement and it is used when you want to have future implementation of a code. So you're not sure, but you know on a high level what the flow will look like or what the um, scaffold looks like within a loop or a function. So you will use pass so that the code doesn't break, and then whenever you know what is supposed to write there, you can write it. Okay.